Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Ultimate Computer, which is episode 24 of season 2 of Star Trek The Original Series. This episode is part of a series of episodes where I review episodes of Star Trek as determined by my user polls. The episode to win my latest user poll for the original series is The Ultimate Computer. So The Ultimate Computer is the episode where the Enterprise has chosen to run an experiment with a computer that is meant to have the ability to run a starship, and Kirk is worried that this means that it will replace him and replace human beings in space. In fact, that is the thought behind it, as it was created by a man named Dr. Daystrom, who comes on board to oversee the experiments, but they go horribly wrong when M5 takes over the Enterprise and starts destroying other starships, and the other starships have to group together to try to destroy the Enterprise to defend themselves. Meanwhile, Kirk is desperately trying to find a way to remove M5 from the computer, which it is very resistant to, and Daystrom seems not very willing to help them do that. However, eventually Kirk finds out that Daystrom modeled the computer off of himself, and he himself has psychological issues, so they realize that is why it is malfunctioning and attacking other people. And he realizes that Daystrom feels a lot of guilt over those men who died, so Kirk tries to make M5 feel that same guilt, and he's successful. At M5 tries to sacrifice himself by getting the Enterprise destroyed. However, Kirk is able to remove the computer from the Enterprise before their ship is destroyed, and they save themselves. So, I wonder what this episode is about. It's funny because I was just reading the Memory Alpha article about this episode, and it says this episode was commentary on how jobs were being lost to a mechanism mechanical machines or whatever were taking over people's jobs. And I was like, ha! You think? Really? I mean, this episode was I think it was almost more blatant and obvious than Let That Be Your Last Battlefield was a commentary on racism. I mean, they made it so clear, like they repeated over and over again, like, oh, you're losing your jobs, oh, machine's gonna take your jobs, oh, machine's taking people's jobs. You never really worry about when people lose their jobs to the machine until it's you that loses your job. Get it? Machines are taking people's jobs. And of course, the whole point of the episode is that the machine cannot do it as well as people. Therefore, those evil bastards should stop giving people's jobs to machines. Now, this problem, of course, only gets worse when in more modern times as technology advances. However, I find this, I find it a little bit amusing because this is Star Trek, because Star Trek Next Generation kind of presents a utopian vision, and there has been similar visions in modern time that people had of that they want for humanity, where humanity doesn't have to worry about working just to survive or working to feed themselves, that they work to better themselves. They work because they like to, because they want to, because they get a job that they want to do and they're inspired to do, because all the menial jobs that people don't really want to do, machines can do them. And so it frees up people to explore creativity more, explore the galaxy more, and explore themselves and pursue what they want to pursue instead of being forced to clean toilets 12 hours a day just to put food on the table. That's kind of the vision of Next Generation. That kind of is what this misses, because the whole problem with machines taking people's jobs is the structure of society, where the structure of society is you need to have a job in order to get money. You need money in order to have shelter, food and shelter, basic things. And as that structure of society, but if you restructure it So you don't need to work menial jobs in order just to survive. That you can survive without working menial jobs. Then why not let the machines do the menial jobs? And so in that way, that people can do the jobs that they want to do, and they can live the career that they want. That's kind of what I get out of Next Generation, anyway. And obviously, this is saying that the computer can replace starship captains, but that's a bit of a stretch. So it's because that's not a menial job that no one wants to do. That's a job that Kirk really likes and really wants to have. So therefore, I kind of find this commentary a bit imperfect. Also, here's the thing, like, as a viewer, and I think most people would have this natural reaction as well, is that the concept of having computers run starships and command starships is a bad idea. And Kirk is pushing back against this, but Daystrom and the Federation, Starfleet seems to go along with Daystrom's thought, where Daystrom's like, oh, well, you think that computer couldn't command a starship because it doesn't have the capacity to feel like a human, so that's why he gave the computer feelings or whatnot to try to give that human judgment. And Spock at first is like very much like, oh, yes, very logical. Oh, you're doing the logical thing. This computer's way smarter than you, Captain. He does change his tune a bit later on. But they all at first seem to have the attitude that, like, there's a much better idea, like, it's a great idea to have a computer in command of the starship. Now, I think that's actually a terrible idea. There are certain jobs, and even in modern society, where a lot of things are automated and mechanical, there's certain jobs that they would never dream of giving to a computer or to mechanization. And even if they created, well, we don't have like a sophisticated AI at the moment, though. But even if they did, like having, having a computer like doing, and basically, I had the idea because Daystrom talked about like how men shouldn't have to die in space at all. So I think the thought process here was to send unmanned starships out into space to explore, but with just computers, which I can't, like, you should know, like, I shouldn't have to explain why that's a stupid idea. And here's my problem, though, is that the episode never refutes this itself. Like, they never say or drive home that having computers be starship commanders is a bad idea. They just have the computer malfunctions and starts killing people, and that's why it's a bad idea. But they never explain, like, even if the computer didn't start killing people, it's still a bad idea. And the episode didn't really tell you that. It didn't explain that. So the conclusion you can take by the end of the episode is, well, if there was a better computer that was just as smart as M5 but didn't kill people, then it would be a good idea to have it command starships. So yeah, because the only reason they gave as to why not to give this, make a computer a starship commander, is because it kills people. Now, some of you might be thinking of Data, because I would be perfectly okay with having Data be a starship commander or a captain. And I'm not like that first officer guy from the episode Redemption Part 2 is like, I don't think androids are capable of being commanders, because that's a totally different situation. So first off, they're not talking about removing all people, all sentient life forms, organic life forms, I should say, from Starfleet and replacing them with androids. They're simply saying that he is an android who is treated just the same as any other sentient life form, any other organic flesh and blood life form, and he's has the ability to rise up in the ranks is the same way any other human being or alien being would. And if he does become a captain, it doesn't mean everything's going to be automated. Everyone else would be organic being, unless, theoretically had more androids. But still, you would still have organic beings. Everything would be the same. He's just a member of Starfleet. So that's totally different than the scenario they're presenting here, where the computer, we have an ultimate computer that absolutely controls everything. It isn't just the captain, mind you. They reduced the crew to a skeleton crew of just 20 people, and it controls, and it's tied into all the systems. It controls engineering. It controls everything, and it's running everything. And many of the officers are just obsolete, as they say. So totally different idea than Data. So Data I have no issue with. This computer, I definitely do. I think anyone right thinking would, because it's just a bad idea. Well, I suppose the episode does give you a reason why this is a bad idea, because computers are always capable of malfunctioning, which is what it does, and it kills a bunch of people. But that's not the only reason why it's a bad idea. It's just a bad idea. But anyway, alright, so here's the thing. They have this experiment where Kirk shows up at a starbase, and he's met by Commodore Wesley, who apparently they're old friends with. And he's like, all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, it's like, hey, Kirk, guess what? Your ship's gonna be the centerpiece of this experiment. We're gonna put this computer, a supercomputer AI, we're gonna put it on the ship. We're gonna rip out like all of your engineering systems in order to integrate this computer from your ship, and it's gonna run your ship, and we're gonna do battle simulations with it. Why? Here, okay, so this is my question. Why are they just ambushing this Kirk with this, like, 2 hours before? It's not really 2 hours, but it seems like 2 hours before the experiment. Wouldn't it have been a better idea if they just had, like, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, scientists who are actually involved in the experiment, like, slowly integrate, like, tiny experiments with the starship that was specifically designed, or at least redesigned, to carry M5 and to hold M5, rather than just all of a sudden, like, ripping out the engineering guts of the Enterprise and just chucking it in there, like, really suddenly. Wouldn't it make more sense if this was done, like, slowly over time, and they could do, like, incremental experiments, do, like, tiny, like, have it fly around the star or whatever, and come back, and then just do more and more and more, and eventually do battle simulations with the same freaking starship and the group of experts who know about M5 working with it, rather than this Kirk who never heard of it and doesn't even like it. Wouldn't that make more sense? And I don't know. And I don't really like this Commodore Wesley guy. He comes off as an asshole in this episode. Well, first of all, like, when they have the first battle simulations that go to plan, he's like, oh yeah, congratulate to M5 for a great experiment, and congratulations to Captain Dunsel. And at first they're like, Dunsel, what the hell does that mean? McCoy is like, what's it mean? What's it mean? What's it mean? And eventually Spock's like, well, it's a term used in Starfleet Academy to refer to something that's useless, that serves no purpose. What an asshole thing to say. Like, he ambushes Kirk at the last second, gives him orders so he has no choice. Hey, guess what? You're just flying around, and we're just going to ambush you with this information. We're going to rip out your engineering guts and shove this supercomputer on your ship, and it's going to take over for these simulations. And when they do it, and he does exactly what he said, hey, you're fucking useless, Captain Dunsel. I mean, what a dick. What an extreme asshole. But let me get to the biggest issue I have with this episode. The one that bothers me every time I watch it. It bothers the hell out of me, and it annoys me, like actively annoys me every time I watch this episode, is when M5 goes crazy and starts like attacking all the other ships and killing people. And of course it cuts off communications, and Kirk and crew can't communicate with the other Starfleet ships, so they have no idea why they're attacking it. But Commodore Wesley is like, Jim, why are you attacking us? Kirk, why are you killing us? Have you gone crazy? I'm like, hey, Commodore Wesley, hey, did you forget that the Enterprise is being controlled by a supercomputer? Did that, like, slip your mind? Because I think that was the whole point of this fucking experiments, is that the supercomputer is controlling everything to the point where you called Kirk useless and served no purpose. Then all of a sudden, when the computer goes crazy and malfunctions and starts killing people, all of a sudden, Kirk's fault. You jump to, Kirk, why are you doing this? What a dick! Why would you? And not only is he a dick, he's either a dick or he's an idiot or he's both. Because, again, it just slipped his mind that a supercomputer is controlling the Enterprise. Like, totally forgot about that. And I wonder if someone in the background is like, hey, Commodore, did you remember that there was, like, a computer controlling the Enterprise? And we're like, oh, yeah. Like, it never even crossed his mind to think maybe it malfunctioning is why it's attacking people, not like someone who's had an exemplary career, a great Starfleet officer who's supposedly a friend. Like, he would just go nuts and start killing people for no good reason when they're just so happy. Like, the fact that there's a supercomputer on this ship that was controlling absolutely everything and making him useless has nothing to do with anything. That's just beside the point. Anyway, that annoys the hell out of me. And I kind of don't like how the episode ends before, like, they resolve the situation, but we don't actually get to see Commodore Wesley after that. We don't get to say, oh, I'm sorry I was like that, Jim. Thank God it wasn't you who attacked us. Like, I think he owes Kirk an apology. Like, why the fuck would he think that Kirk would attack them? That's so stupid. Anyway, don't get me wrong. Now, so far you might think that I really hate this episode. I don't, actually. I actually like this episode. Those are just my nitpicks that kind of grind my gears. I think this episode actually does a really good job at being suspenseful. To me, it's one of the more smooth, suspenseful episodes of the original series. And it's one of my favorites of Season 2. Because Season 2 had an issue where it kept going down to planets and doing westerns or doing freaking seeing Nazis or gangsters or other people from the 20th century, which I really hated that. Romans or whatnot, which is not what Star Trek should be about, in my opinion. So it's great to get just a space opera episode that's taking place in the Enterprise, taking place in space. I think this is one of the few episodes we actually, the original series where we get a lot of interaction with other Starfleet ships. And it's an interesting concept that they're trying new technology. We meet Dr. Daystrom, who, we just learned in this episode, it was created the whole, designer of the computers that run Enterprise, and he's like this super genius. And I think he's a really interesting character, even though his portrayal in this episode is a bit melodramatic, but, again, this is the original series. Unlike those people who hate the alternative factor, I remember I'm watching the original series, and melodrama and overacting is par for the course for the original series. So if it's a good episode, I don't let that interfere with the fact that it's a good episode. And he's still, so in the confines of the 60s cheese, he is an interesting character that is portrayed as kind of complex. And because this was the 60s in the original series, it is kind of a big deal that they had an African-American play him who was seen, and they never bring up the fact he's African-American and he's seen as a super genius, which, I imagine was not too common in 60s broadcast television to do that. So it's interesting, gets into his psyche. Of course, it does get over the top of melodrama sometimes. It's like, you can't kill M5! But as I said, it's the original series. Of course they're going to do that. And it was suspenseful, like the battle of wits between Kirk and the supercomputer and how Kirk is trying to remove it. Now, they've done several episodes of Kirk versus supercomputer, and every time Kirk always wins by logicking it to death, which I think is dumb. And he kind of does this here. Sort of really. It's not really logicking it to death this time. It's more of he finds out it's based on Daystrom, so he uses his knowledge of Daystrom to guilt these fellows who try to guilt trip it to death. Which is what he does, and that's successful. Like, I don't know, why does he always has to talk a computer to death? Why can't he actually use technical skills for once? But whatever. I do find it a bit far-fetched that's how he's able to defeat it, by giving it a big guilt trip. but it's still good. I still think it's suspenseful, especially when the M5 like one of the moments that made me, especially when I was first watching the original series, that really stood out to me is when Scotty in a red shirt go to remove it from engineering, and all of a sudden diverts power to the warp core, which like instantly kills the red shirt. Like, it's one of the better red shirt deaths in my opinion, and that was like, it was like really exciting. Now, Kirk actually, it was a good red shirt death because Kirk had the appropriate reaction, rather than most of the episodes, especially like the Apple. There's a lot of ridiculous red shirt deaths in that episode, but I already covered it. Kirk doesn't give a fuck. He's like, red shirts, who cares? And no one shows any reaction. But here, Kirk has the appropriate reaction where he immediately goes up to Daystrom and is like, that just killed a man! Which is how he should react when somebody under his command gets killed. Like, really pissed off and really upset and really like, this cannot happen. So I think it's one of the better red shirt deaths, and it was just the way that it came out of nowhere like that was like super suspenseful, and I love like how trapped it has that element of feeling like suspense and like these people are just trapped on the ship, and they are really helpless against this computer to do anything. Like, everything they try fails. I love how like M5 even like tricks them and makes them think they're succeeding in rewriting power, when in fact they were never in any danger of doing so. It was just making them waste their time. Like, and so it sets up these really high, really impossible stakes. You're like, how the hell are they going to get out of this? And it makes it super intense when they get into the psychology of Dr. Daystrom and how he was kind of a boy genius and peaked in his 20s, and so now it's like just trying to outdo himself, and is kind of has a damaged psyche because of that, and because he used his own personality in the computer, that those personality flaws had integrated into the computer, which was not created perfectly. So yeah, and even though Wesley was being a moron, I still found those battle scenes where, you know, Enterprise was destroying other Starfleet ships, and Kirk was sitting there helpless, like not being able to do anything about it, like super intense. So this is actually, so I actually get a lot of enjoyment out of this episode. This is, I think, one of the better episodes of the original series. So anyway, my rating for the Ultimate Computer out of 10, I'm going to give this a 7. Very good. Not quite an 8. I think I've given this an 8 before, and I almost give it an 8, but Commodore Wesley being a moron annoys the hell out of me. And the fact that they were like too over the top with how obvious they are with the commentary, like bonking over the head. Hey, it's about machines taking people's jobs. Yeah, no shit. Like, stop drilling that. We get it. And of course, the melodrama of Daystrom is over the top sometimes. It's like, don't kill the machine, he can't die. So, because of those reasons, I'm not going to give it an 8, but it's still a good episode. It's still really suspenseful. It's still something I enjoy a lot. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, of course, Dr. Daystrom. The Daystrom Institute, something that was brought up in Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, all other spin-offs over and over again repeatedly. I always think of Vosh when I think of the Daystrom. He's always talking about taking the artifacts to the Daystrom Institute, but we actually see the Daystrom Institute in Picard, that Dr. Girardi actually worked for it. So that was interesting. Apparently it's in Japan. I don't think I knew that. And it was named after this guy, Dr. Daystrom. So that was interesting Anyway, that is it for my review of the Ultimate Computer. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check out my channel as I cover many more Star Trek episodes. If you catch one of my polls, you can vote for which episode I will review next. And if you join me on Patreon, you can actually just participate in Patreon polls that I do every month for reviewing Star Trek episodes. Or if you donate enough money, you can actually tell me what episode to review, and I'll review it. So yeah, there's a link to my Patreon below if you want to join that. Otherwise, you can check out my channel for many more content. I cover all sorts of Star Trek, doing Star Trek Discovery at the moment, also covering other shows like The Expanse, Star Wars, The Clone Wars, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks so much for watching.